international crisis. Presidents Biden and Putin try to avoid war in Ukraine. Must pass bills. Congress wrestles with budget deadlines. Winter Olympics boycott. China ridicules the U.S. decision.
A date which will live in infamy.
And 80 years later, how the U.S. is remembering the attack on Pearl Harbor. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, December 7th, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this Feast of St. Ambrose. I'm Tracy Sable. Today marks the 80th anniversary of one of the most solemn days in American history, the attack by the Empire of Japan against U.S. military installations at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The attack on December 7th, 1941, claimed the lives of more than 2,400 American service members and civilians. As recently as this week, the remains were identified of an Ohio sailor who died that day aboard the USS Oklahoma. Well, today has been marked by solemn remembrances, including by President Joe Biden and the First Lady. Meantime, the president also spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin in a highly anticipated call. But was it enough to keep the peace and avoid an international crisis? White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. Tonight, even after that phone call this morning between President Biden and President Putin, U.S. officials admit they still don't know what President Putin is going to do. Meanwhile, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan addressed reporters.
The White House says President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke for a full 2 hours. The question now, what were the results of their secure video call?
He told President Putin directly that if Russia further invades Ukraine, the United States and our European allies would respond with strong economic measures.
President Biden wants Russia to know there will be severe consequences if it invades Ukraine.
As we pursue diplomatic channels, we will also prepare for all contingencies, just as we have been doing for weeks now, including through the preparation of specific responses to Russian escalation should they be required.
President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden earlier made an unannounced visit to the World War II memorial in the nation's capital, remembering and honoring all the lives lost on December 7, 1941.
A date which will live in infamy.
It was 80 years ago today Japan launched its surprise attack at Pearl Harbor, marking America's entry into World War II.
Also at the White House, focusing on improving maternal health. Today, a call to action.
Vice President Kamala Harris warning that women in the U.S. are dying before, during, and after childbirth, dying at a higher rate than any other developed nation. For Black, Native American women and women in rural America, the risk is even higher.
Black women are 3 times as likely to die from pregnancy-related complications.
The White House wants to encourage states to expand postpartum coverage and spark innovation by allowing states to establish maternal health homes.
Now, back to the briefing room for a moment. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan also said that the conversation between President Biden and President Putin was direct and straightforward. There was a give and take, and there was no finger wagging. Whether that prevents an invasion remains to be seen. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Senate Democrats are facing a self-imposed deadline to pass several complex bills. President Biden's Build Back Better Act may be coming up soon. The packed year-end schedule also includes a sweeping defense bill and raising the debt ceiling. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports.
Well, there's a lot that needs to get done in Congress and not a lot of time. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says he is confident Democrats can get their must-do list done before the holidays. President Biden's Build Back Better Act tops the list.
The reason why this timeline is so important is because this legislation is about lowering costs for American families.
But Republicans continue to say the Democrats' economic plan is filled with gimmicks and not totally paid for.
There is no single year in which all tax provisions in the bill will be in full effect at the same time. The child tax credit and earned income tax credit provisions expire after just 1 year. Yet the Democrats have consistently said this is intended to be permanent.
As is, the bill will not pass the Senate. Two Democratic senators continue to say they want more time to look at the effects of the plan on the economy.
Well, I don't know if setting a certain time is going to fix inflation. Inflation is not transitory, as we know. It's been confirmed by many, many people now, and even the president has said so himself.
I personally believe that the best way to create legislation is to be thoughtful and careful so that we're crafting legislation that truly represents the interests that we want to achieve and that creates a benefit and helps people all across Arizona and the country. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Both senators believe a holiday deadline for passing the Build Back Better agenda may not be in the cards. In other news, Central California Congressman Devin Nunes announced he would resign from Congress after 19 years to become the chief executive officer of former President Trump's new media company. Sources tell me the new redistricting lines drawn up in the Golden State make it more difficult for him to get reelected. So when this opportunity came along, he decided to jump on it. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
The Catholic Church in Switzerland will examine its records on sexual abuse over the past several decades. Two history professors from the University of Zurich will lead a new research team. Bishops in Switzerland are the latest to take steps towards accountability. China is vowing vengeance against the U.S. in reaction to yesterday's announcement of a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympic Games. China warned the U.S. to, quote, stop politicizing sports. It called the democratic boycott a self-directed political farce and vowed to take, quote, resolute countermeasures. International human rights groups have sought a complete boycott of the Winter Games to protest China's treatment of its ethnic minorities. And joining me now is Gordon Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War. Gordon, welcome back. Great to see you as always. What do you think of this diplomatic boycott, and do you think it goes far enough?
Well, certainly it's a step in the right direction, Tracy, but it certainly doesn't go far enough. Remember, Jen Psaki, when she announced this yesterday, was talking about genocide and crimes against humanity. And a diplomatic boycott is just a drop in the bucket of what we need to do. We know that Chinese leaders are engaging in these atrocities, so we should be applying Magnitsky sanctions. We should be cutting off trade, investment, all the rest of these things, which are absolutely necessary to prevent these horrors.
And Gordon, Chinese officials are now saying that the U.S. will pay the price for its decision to boycott. I want to get your thoughts on that. And also, what do you think China means by pay the price?
We really don't know. In the past, China has threatened all sorts of retaliation against the United States and did not carry through. I think this time they will carry through because Xi Jinping has, I think, got his back to the wall. But we've got to remember that China is in a very fragile position right now with its debt crisis, with a stagnant economy, with all sorts of other problems. It's in no position to impose costs on the United States. So I do think that any measures that come down the pike are going to be pretty inconsequential and probably won't last very long.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting that China may establish a military base on Africa's Atlantic coast. What advantages, Gordon, do you think this will give China? And also, how concerned should we be as the U.S.?
Yeah, the advantage for China is that we're going to have to take assets which we would otherwise allocate to the Pacific and put them in the Atlantic to defend the American homeland. And our U.S. Navy, which bears the brunt of this, is already overstretched. It's overworked. It's much too small. So this really helps China in the Pacific. Now, we've got to be concerned because this is not the only military base that China is going to establish. They're also looking at Walvis Bay in Namibia. There's maybe even one in the Bahamas coming down that we can see. So I actually think that this is a whole reorientation of Chinese military power, which means we got to reorient our power as well.
Yeah, indeed. Very, very concerning there. I want to turn now to Evergrande, which we've talked about before, and its massive financial troubles. What is the latest on that? And also, what do you know about the Chinese government freeing up nearly $188 billion to invest in the economy? That is, what's the connection there, if anything?
Well, yesterday, Evergrande did not make a bond payment of about $83.5 million US. That was the end of a grace period, which means that lenders can now call defaults. I'm not sure they're going to do that because China is going to muscle them into some sort of arrangement. China's really response and only response is to loosen up the money supply, just pour more liquid onto the fire. And although this might delay things a little bit, that's the reason why China got into these problems, because of ultra-loose monetary policies. So Beijing has no solutions except to try to defer things. But when they defer things, they make the problem bigger and makes it basically insoluble. I don't think China gets past this debt crisis.
Another thing I want to turn to, Gordon, is this document that China's Communist Party released called China Democracy That Works. They did this in response to President Biden's Democracy Summit. What more do you know about that?
China, especially over the last couple of weeks, has gone into full court press on propaganda, really malicious. They talk about whole process, people's democracy, all sorts of terms that don't make sense. And really I think they're really afraid of this. The one thing that Americans forget is that China considers us to be an existential enemy, not because of anything we do, Tracy, but because of who we are, because we have a democracy, because we stand for human rights. The Chinese regime knows that we have this great inspirational impact on the Chinese people. And this democracy summit that President Biden plans to hold soon, I think has really spooked the Chinese regime at a time where their hold on power probably is pretty fragile.
And Gordon, quickly, only less than a minute left, but I really want to talk about this. We mentioned this at the beginning of the show, and also, as you know, today is the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. I'd like to get your thoughts on this solemn anniversary, and also, do you see any parallels between Japan in 1941 and China today?
Well, there's certainly parallels, because we were taken by surprise when we should not have been. And right now we have a political class in Washington that does not appreciate the threat that China poses. We have a president who says China's a competitor while China calls us an enemy. We could lose our country, Tracy, because we're not defending ourselves. We're a much stronger society, but we could lose. We could lose our country.
Strong words, Gordon. Thank you so much for your time and analysis. Always appreciate it.
Thank you, Tracy.
Political turmoil continues to embroil Myanmar, also known as Burma. In prison, civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi was convicted and sentenced yesterday on charges of incitement and violating coronavirus restrictions. She lost power during last February's military coup. Separately, protesters gathered to condemn 5 deaths during a recent demonstration in that country. An ancient clay tablet that was looted from an Iraqi museum 30 years ago has found its way home. It is known as the Gilgamesh Dream Tablet. It is one of the world's oldest surviving religious texts, dating back 3,500 years ago. It was looted from an Iraqi museum during the Gulf War back in 1991. It was returned to Iraqi authorities during a formal ceremony yesterday. Coming up, studying Eastern churches, the push to learn more and collaborate, and birthplace of Jesus. Bethlehem joins the Advent festivities. A Vatican-run graduate school created more than a century ago is teaching its students about Eastern religions like Orthodoxy. The Pontifical Oriental Institute in Rome was founded in 1917. A few years later, it was given to the Jesuits. The Institute promotes the study of Eastern churches regarding their liturgy, theology, and history. Joining us now from Rome is Father David Nazar, the rector of the Pontifical Oriental Institute. Father, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Institute, why it was founded, and also in particular, we understand the library is quite impressive.
Yeah, I'll start with that question first. There is no institute like the one that we have, none in the world, and no library compares to the library that we have. And the reason is because about 100 years ago, a little more than 100 years ago, the Pope saw that a lot of the Eastern Catholic and Orthodox churches did not have a lot of resources to study their own traditions, their own riches. Many of them were smaller churches. Many of them just didn't have the facilities to create a university. And that's always been a major missionary impulse of the Catholic Church, is to have schools, universities, research centers. So they decided to create, long before ecumenism was something popular, an ecumenical university. It's actually a graduate school for Orthodox and Catholics of Eastern rites to study their own traditions and make them available to the broader world.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And as you know, Pope Francis just returned from Cyprus and Greece, both majority Orthodox countries. Yesterday, we heard that he hopes to soon meet with the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. Do you know, how are relations between the Catholic and Orthodox faiths right now at the moment?
Well, it depends on what level. Among people, there isn't that much tension. Even, for example, at our own institute, we have members of all of the Eastern churches, Orthodox and Catholic. We always have Russian Orthodox students at our place. But there are areas where it gets very delicate, especially, quite honestly, when you move up in the hierarchy. Then there's tensions about territories and who should be in charge, and the historical questions that remain unresolved. There's painful histories there. And so a lot of that is really hard to deal with. So at one level, there's always a positive conversation that tries to move forward. And at another level, there's a lot of suspicion, historical suspicion, that impedes progress of dialogue.
And before I let you go, Father, switching gears just slightly here, as we continue on with this pandemic and new variant, can you tell us what changes your institute and other Vatican schools have made since the pandemic began?
Well, this is an important question, because we have students from about 40 different countries, from Russia to Ethiopia, from Italy to South India. And we're all anxiously concerned about ecology and about healthy buildings and green buildings. And the Pope has given great impulse for us to do something. So he's saying that the Catholic Church should lead by example and not simply give moral sermons to the world. So what we've tried to do is to improve the quality of the health of the building and therefore of the students by air purification systems from companies like Puridyme and Delos in New York. Puridyme is in California. By digitizing resources with companies like Shelter Zoom in New York. And there's so many of these companies that want to make a difference, and they see collaboration with the Catholic Church as a primary way of making a difference. So we've worked on air quality, we've worked on sound quality, light quality. We've added solar panels to diminish our ecological footprint, all trying to follow the inspiration of Pope Francis and make the environment healthier for students. Because the future is here. And so we've got to make some courageous steps and even risk some things, because if we're not risking things today, we'll lose everything tomorrow.
Well, Father, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. We really appreciate it, Father. David Nazar, rector of the Pontifical Oriental Institute in Rome. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Up next, Year of St. Joseph, devotions to nourish the faithful. The lights for the Christmas tree in Manger Square have been turned on in Bethlehem. The festivities included fireworks, traditional dancing, and a nativity show. The celebration also reflected renewed tourism after more than a year of coronavirus restrictions. Manger Square is believed to mark where Christ our Savior was born. Also, relics of St. Joseph and the Blessed Mother have been touring local parishes in the Diocese of Rome. According to tradition, one is a brown cloak believed to belong to St. Joseph. The other is a still colorful veil, which is believed to have belonged to the Virgin Mary. It is held that both relics were brought from the Holy Land to Rome by St. Jerome in the 4th century. They had remained hidden in a Roman basilica until 2 years ago. The exhibit honors tomorrow's conclusion of the Year of St. Joseph. And although tomorrow marks the end of the Year of St. Joseph, the faithful can still devote themselves to the saint. A guidebook called the Consecration to St. Joseph allows the faithful to not only learn more about the saint, but also strengthen their relationship with him. And joining me now to discuss this is Father Donald Calloway, Vicar Provincial of the Marian Fathers of the Immaculate Conception and author of Consecration to St. Joseph. Father, welcome. Great to see you. Can you tell us a little bit more about what a consecration to St. Joseph means and also the steps that individuals and groups can use to get involved?
Yeah, so, consecration, the word just means to set something aside for a holy purpose. So we're consecrated to Jesus by our baptism, but to aid that, to help that, many people consecrate themselves to Our Lady, which is wonderful. And now we have this wonderful practice of consecration to St. Joseph, because who knew Jesus better than Mary and Joseph? So by doing it, it really helps us to get super close to Jesus. And it's a 33-day program. It can be done by individuals or families, parishes, groups. It's wonderful. The feedback so far is quite amazing.
Yeah, and Father, why should we, the faithful, why should we seek to learn more from St. Joseph? And also, what lessons can we learn from him?
Well, right now the times are very difficult, right? We have a lot of attacks on the family. We have a lot of confusion when it comes to gender. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? And so, a couple of years ago, I was inspired to really put this form of devotion together for the church and for the world in these difficult times. And so, the whole point is to get back to the basics, the importance of family, the importance of virtue, of growing in virtue. I mean, think about Jesus, the God-man. He lived in that family unit and was obedient to Mary and Joseph. And Jesus actually wanted to imitate St. Joseph as a young boy. So that says a lot about the greatness of St. Joseph. And we're brothers and sisters of Jesus. So let's imitate Jesus in this as well. Let's go to Joseph.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, Father, when you were writing the devotional, was there anything that surprised you, maybe that you learned about St. Joseph during this process?
There absolutely was. So many things. We could be here an hour or two, but you were just mentioning, about the cloak of St. Joseph that was hidden for a long time and just discovered 2 years ago, and now it's on display. Well, one of the things that I discovered was the wedding ring that St. Joseph gave to the Blessed Virgin Mary. In Italian, it's called the Santo Anello, is still in existence. It's housed in a gigantic reliquary in the cathedral in Perugia, Italy, about 30 minutes from Assisi. And several times a year, the bishop exposes it for the faithful, and engaged couples and married couples are allowed to touch their ring to the Santo Anello, to the holy wedding ring that St. Joseph gave Our Lady. That's amazing.
Absolutely. And what a beautiful gift for those couples as well. Curious, I know a lot of people are watching this and they're going to be interested in reading your book. Where can they get it?
Yeah, so you can get it on EWTNRC.com, the religious catalog for EWTN. And we have a website for the book as well, consecrationtostjoseph.org. And you can get the paperback, ebook, audiobook. Yeah, it's everywhere right now, even your Catholic bookstores. Everybody has it.
And Father, before I let you go, not a whole lot of time left, but I'm wondering, anything else that you would like to share with our audience?
I would say, the year of St. Joseph is coming to an end, but we're going to keep going to him, right? I don't think things are ever going to be the same now. We have this fresh understanding, newfound love for him. Let's keep going to him in the years ahead, because who knows what the future holds? But I can tell you what we do know. We're going to continue to need St. Joseph. So ite ad Joseph, go to Joseph.
Well, Father Calloway, thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. God bless you.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.